Today I'll be going over a tutorial on how to play Lift Off, Get Me Off This Planet from Pencil First Games. This is a not really semi-cooperative, kind of a family-friendly game. Let's take a look. In Lift Off, you're going to be trying to get your aliens off the planet before it blows up. Everyone starts with 10 aliens of their color here in the core. This is obviously a 4-player game because there are 4 different colors of aliens in the core to start with. And you're going to be accomplishing this by taking your aliens, moving them out of the core, and then onto these liftoff points. And there are 4 liftoff points in each game, and this is a modular board. So this part is your base, and then each of these is a piece that comes off like a little puzzle. These are your exit points. These are always going to be on the board. At these 4 points to get your aliens out to the surface. But in order to get off the planet, you're going to need these different liftoff points. There are 10 of them that you can choose from, and I'll be going over what each of them does a little bit later in the video. You can choose them at random when you play. The ones I have out are the recommended ones to play with on your first game: bonfire, jetpack, satellite, and rocket ship. In order to get your aliens off the planet, you're going to be using cards to do so. There's a big deck of cards you'll be drawing from. They have both resource cards and action cards in them. The resource cards look like this. They're only a couple of resources. There's screws and fuel, and then there's a wild card that's fuel or screw. And these are the things that you're going to need in order to get your aliens onto the liftoff platforms and then activate the liftoffs to get them off the planet. And then there are a bunch of different action cards that will do different things, either to help you or to hurt your friends that you're playing with, and I'll go over those in a minute too. At the beginning of the game, you'll take this little moon token and put it up here on the star space. And at the end of each turn, you're going to be moving the moon around the planet. This is important because the phase of the moon affects whether or not some of these liftoffs will work or the chance of success of the liftoff happening. When the moon is directly over a particular module, that area is considered to be a full moon. Once the moon moves away, it is a half moon. And when it's directly on the other side, it's a new moon. And that will affect whether the liftoff point can be active or not. You're also going to take the sun marker and you'll place it on the number that corresponds with the number of players. So in this case, this is a 4-player game, so I'll put it on 4. And every time the moon makes its way all the way around the planet back to this starting point, the sun marker will move 1 forward on this track. And once it gets down to here, the planet explodes. You're also going to have some dice, and the dice will come into play with certain of the liftoff points. Everyone starts the game with 2 cards. On your turn, you're going to draw 2 more cards, so you'll have a hand to play from. And you'll have 2 movement points to spend, and you can also play as many action cards as you want. You can also trade in 2 of your cards for 1 from the deck. And when you do all that, the trading in of cards, playing of cards, and movement, the order is determined by you. It doesn't matter. You can play cards first, you can move first, you can intersperse those as you need to. So it takes 1 movement point to move an alien from the core out to the surface of the planet through one of these exit points. Like that. So my 2 movement points could be doing that. It also takes 1 movement point to go around to these different modules on the board. So if you move out 1 to here, you could then spend another movement point to move over to one of the liftoff points. There's also an action card you can play called Move Your Alien. That'll let you move your alien an additional spot if you wanted to. Once your alien is on one of these liftoff points, they're not actually eligible for liftoff until they get onto the platform. And there's a cost to get your alien onto each of the platforms, and it depends on which liftoff point it is. For instance, this is the bonfire, and in this case, you would pay 1 screw that would go here to put your alien onto the bonfire platform. So you would take him from laying flat to standing up to indicate that he's on the platform. Then in order to get him off the planet, you have to satisfy the rules for liftoff. Again, in this case, on the bonfire, you have to roll a die. So you would have to pay 1 fuel. Let's say I play this. This is the wild, so I play that as a fuel. And when I do that on the bonfire, I can then roll a die. The chance of success on the die roll depends on the phase of the moon. So if the moon's here and you're lighting a bonfire, it's going to be much harder for a passing ship to see you. Whereas if the moon is on the other side, and it's a new moon, so it's completely dark over here, it's much easier for the bonfire to work. Once you've had a successful liftoff, you take any aliens that were on the platform off, and the cards get discarded and reset. So there are some other cards that you can use during your turn. There is, you can play Tornado. When you play Tornado, any aliens that are on the surface that aren't on platforms get moved to the core. So any alien that's already on a platform is safe, but all the other aliens would get moved to the core. When you play an Electric Storm, all the players will discard their cards. When you play Supernova, all of the liftoff points are equivalent of a full moon for your turn. So if you're on a spot that needs a full moon in order to launch, you could play this, and that would give you a full moon. Now, again, this only works on your turn. You can't use this as a defensive play against other players. Asteroids make all the liftoff points like a new moon. Because the phase of the moon is so important, there's also a card that lets you move the moon. So, for instance, if you're trying to be more successful at the bonfire and you want to get this moon off so it's not full moon anymore, you can play this card and move the moon away. There's also a Terraform card. They recommend not using this for the first game, which I agree with because it'll just make things more complicated while you're getting used to it. But what this does is it lets you remove any empty liftoff point, which would be ones that don't have aliens on the platform. You would take it off and you would replace it with one from the box. This is a Garglore card. This is the Garglore. He starts in the core and he moves when you play one of these cards. You can move him either to the core or to a liftoff point. If he's on a liftoff point, then that liftoff point cannot be activated until he's gone. Once you're done moving your aliens and playing the cards, then you will move the moon 1 space forward to signal it's the end of your turn, and the next player will take their turn. So here's an example of a turn. I have 2 cards, so at the beginning of a turn, I'm going to draw 2 more cards. And I have a Garglore card, 2 fuel cards, and a screw. So for my 2 movement points, I'm going to take one of my aliens and I'm going to move him 1 here and then 2 to here. And I want to get on this platform. In this case, I have to pay a fuel and a screw. So I would pay a fuel and a screw and they would go right here. That would put me on this platform. And then these 2 cards will contribute to the liftoff cost. In this case, 6 fuel and 6 screws. Now I have 2 more cards. The fuel card I can't use this turn, but I could use the Garglore. And let's say we've got somebody who has a couple of guys over here and maybe one that's going to be close to getting over there, and I don't want him to lift off. So I'm going to play the Garglore and move him up here to block that spot. And then that card gets discarded. It's the end of my turn, so I move the moon. So this is how the game's going to progress. Everyone's going to take turn moving their aliens around and loading them up onto platforms and playing cards to try and stop other people. And the moon is going to keep progressing every time it gets to the star. Remember to move the sun 1 step forward. And people are going to be trying to get their aliens off the planet. Ah! Run away, run away. Until eventually you're going to get down to here. If someone gets all of their aliens off the planet before it explodes, then that person wins. If no one has completed getting their aliens off and the planet explodes, then whoever has gotten the most aliens off will win the game. If 2 or more players have gotten the same number of aliens off, then whoever has the most resource cards will win the game. And there is a difference between a resource card and an action card. They both come from the same deck, but the resource cards are the fuel, screws, and wild cards. They have a green border. The action cards have a red border. Okay, let's take a closer look at these liftoff points. So each of these liftoff points it has a cost in order to get on the platform. and then a cost for the liftoff to be able to take place. There's also a limit on the number of aliens that can be present on the platform. And they're going to be dependent many times on the phase of the moon. This is the rocket ship. There's a limit of 6 aliens that can be on the platform. The cost of getting on the platform is 1 fuel and 1 screw. So those cards would be played here. And then they would contribute to the cost necessary to activate the liftoff point. In this case, it would be 6 fuel and 6 screws, which is the same as the number of aliens that can be on the platform. So each time an alien gets on, they pay a screw and a fuel, which would go towards the cost. When you put an alien on a platform, you can overpay. For instance, let's say there are 3 of your aliens and 1 of somebody else's aliens on this platform. And you want to put another alien on and lift it off before anyone else gets on there. You could pay from your hand the cards that you need in order to make the total 6 fuel and 6 screws, even if you don't have the maximum number of aliens on the platform. This shows the effect of the phase of the moon on the liftoff point. For the rocket ship, it cannot lift off if it's a new moon or a half moon. It can only lift off on a full moon and if all the necessary cards are present. This is a satellite. It can have 3 aliens on it. It costs 2 screws to get on the platform, and then to take off, it can be any phase of the moon, and you have to have a 6 screw total here. The jetpack can only take 1 alien at a time, and as soon as you pay the cost to put him on the platform, he will lift off. The cost of putting him on the platform and lifting off is affected by the phase of the moon. If it's a new moon, it costs 2 fuel. If it's a half moon, it costs 3 fuel. And if it's a full moon, it costs 4 fuel. So once you pay those costs, the alien immediately gets on the platform and takes off. For the bonfire, you can have 4 aliens sitting around the bonfire. You pay 1 screw to get them on the liftoff platform, and then you pay 1 fuel to roll the die. If it's a new moon, you have to roll only 1 or more rocket ships on this die in order to lift off. If it's a half moon, you have to roll 2 or more rocket ships, and if it's a full moon, you have to roll 3. And this die has the 1, 2, and 3 rocket ships on it. It also has a couple of X's. If you roll an X, it means the liftoff was not successful. This is the UFO. You can have 3 aliens in the UFO, and the cost of putting them on there changes depending on the order that they've gone on. The first one only costs 1 fuel, the second costs 2 screws, and the third costs 3 fuel. It cannot take off if it's a full moon or a half moon, and once you have 4 fuel, 2 screws, and it's a new moon, the UFO will lift off. Oh, I like this one, the slingshot. This is cute. So you can only have 1 alien on the platform. The amount that you pay depends on the phase of the moon. So if it's a new moon, you can pay 2 fuel. If it's a half moon, you pay a fuel and a screw. And if it's a full moon, you pay 2 screws. Once you have your guy loaded up on the platform, in order for him to take off, someone else, another alien, either yours or someone else's, has to come along, pay the right cost, and then your guy will lift off. So in other words, here's your guy on the platform, and here another guy comes on and loads up and goes, whee! This is the Miracle, and you can have 1 of each player's aliens on here. So for 4 players, you could have 1 of each color on here. In order to get on the platform, you pay an action card, which is one of the ones with the red border, not a resource card, but the red border card. And once you have 1 of each color alien on the platform, you lift off. So again, if there are 4 players in the game, you need to have 1 of each color in order for it to activate. This is the trampoline. You can have 2 aliens on it. There's no cost to get on the trampoline. You have to pay 1 screw to roll a die. It's this white die again. And how many you have to roll depends on the phase of the moon. New moon, you have to roll 3. Half moon, you can roll 2 or more. And a full moon, 1 or more rockets. However, if you roll an X, then all the aliens on the trampoline get transported back to the core. In teleport, you can have 3 aliens on the platform, and there's no cost for getting on the platform. It only works during a new moon, and you can't prepay the cost. When the moon goes into the new moon spot, so opposite side of the planet from this module, The players who are on the platform have the option of paying the cost to activate it. If there are 3 aliens on the platform, then you have to pay 3 fuel in order for them to lift off. If, say, you have 3 different color aliens on there, and only 2 people want to pay the cost or can pay the cost, then it's not going to be active. But you can pay the total whether or not they're your aliens. So let's say red, blue, and green are on here. Red and blue are willing to pay, but green is not for some reason. Red could pay 2 fuel, blue could pay 1, and all 3 would lift off. So you could really hold back your friends by getting up on this platform and then refusing to pay the cost. This is the Stargate. This one is a little bit different. There can be an infinite number of aliens on the platform, and it would be a little cramped. In order to get on the platform, you have to pay an action card. And then, instead of there being a generic liftoff cost, what will happen is anytime the moon gets onto the star symbol, which is where you move the sun forward, you roll a die. And you'll be rolling this blue die. And the result of the roll will determine what happens. You can, if you roll the draw 1, then every player draws a card. You could also roll this. Every player draws 2 cards. If you roll Earthquake, you remove the Stargate from the game and replace it with a different one. All the aliens that were on the Stargate are returned to the core. If you roll the Tornado, it's the same effect as the Tornado card. All the aliens that are not on launch platforms but are on the surface are returned to the core. The Electrical Storm is the same as the card. All players would discard their cards. And if you roll this rocket ship, then liftoff occurs. So there's only 1 in 6 chance that the aliens are going to get off of the planet when you get a chance to roll this die, which is when the moon hits that star point on the board. You can use a Move the Moon card in order to activate it, either by moving the moon forward 1 or by moving the moon back 1. If you play a Move the Moon card and it moves the moon back 1 off of the star marker, then the sun will move back 1 also. If the Stargate is in play, anytime the moon reaches that star marker, this die is going to get rolled whether there are aliens on the platform or not. So yeah, it's a little risky to have your aliens to commit to having your aliens on the platform. However, if you are about to be rolling for this particular liftoff because you're almost to the star point on the moon track, and you have aliens that are not doing anything else, you might as well just throw them on the Stargate and see what happens. There's just enough strategy to make it interesting for older players, but it's friendly enough to make it interesting and good for younger players. It is short enough and light enough to throw in between other games, but still be interesting. It also looks really good. Good components. I like this board and the modules. And the modules are nice because it makes it different every time you play. Alright, thanks for visiting the Dragon Table. See you next time.